And over to you, Brenda.
All right, welcome everyone. We are so glad to have you here for our celebration of Coding Connections, OTF Coding Connections. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. You already know about our Whose Land from Taking It Global, the app that you can use for some of your land acknowledgements. But today we want to identify, acknowledge the lands of all of the lands of our First Peoples. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. So we want to take a moment of personal reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and consider how we are and can each in our own way try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you for being here for this learning today.
Thanks so much, Brenda. That's awesome. And I see that Brenda you have the final agenda there, Peter, which is super. I am going to now move on by doing what I was really looking forward to doing, and that is, as part of our celebration, we are really lucky that the OTF president, Parker Robinson, has agreed to join us. Parker has been an incredible role model for us at OTF this year. Even though we've not been able to be in the office at all this year, he has been absolutely fabulous at making sure that we have been working on projects of great importance to teachers, and it's been just fantastic to have some time with him. So without further ado, I really wanted Parker to be able to meet our OTF Coding Connections folks and just have a moment to chat with you and celebrate your learning. So Parker, thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Lindy. Thanks for the kind words. I really appreciate it. But it's been my pleasure to work at OTF this year, and I look forward to the next few months of my term as we move forward advocating for teachers and public education. So it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon. I recognize we are near the end of the work week, and I am sure you are feeling the strain of the challenges that we're facing in education. This event is meant to be a celebration of your professional growth and the opportunities your projects are going to provide our students. OTF has always worked hard to provide opportunities that are relevant and timely. We recognize teachers have many demands on them. If we're going to ask you to participate in activities to grow your skills and knowledge, it is important that we respect and acknowledge your valuable time. OTF congratulates all the participants, and we celebrate your determination to complete your projects during these unprecedented challenges that we're facing during the pandemic. Your ability to adjust to what you have been doing to suit the ever-evolving landscape in our schools and classrooms is truly impressive. I know from my colleagues in the Near North District School Board at the high school I teach, they are feeling the pressure of the constant shifting of what they have to do. I think it's important to highlight that participants from across grade levels, both elementary and secondary, found ways to use coding to connect subject areas, collaborate with colleagues, and introduce students to coding. The rapid growth of technology in our daily lives does not seem to be slowing down, and students with an understanding of coding will have opportunities that lead them in so many great directions. So well done to you all. As I explored the work of each group, I recognize the incredible creativity that was used to create the projects and activities that you've been sharing with each other and with your students. Not only were your projects based in the traditional subject areas of math and science, but many of you found ways to integrate coding into subject areas such as art, music, and social sciences. As well, some of you used an inclusive approach with your students with complex needs. As a former resource teacher, I'm particularly inspired by this. All of these creative approaches will help students embrace coding even when they do not see themselves having strong connection to math. Before I wrap up, I'd like to thank our coding experts, Brenda Sherry and Peter Skillen, for their support of the professional learners. OTF thanks you for making Coding Connections a tremendous success this year. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not give big thanks to the woman who brought all of this together, Lindy Amato. The incredible work that goes on behind the scenes often goes unnoticed, but Lindy does this work without complaint and with a passion for the teaching profession that's second to none. Our organization, OTF, and our members are so lucky to have you, and we thank you, Lindy. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I'm choked up and a little teary. That was very nice. Thank you, Parker. So we're going to move over now to Peter, who's going to introduce our fabulous keynote speakers. Peter.
Actually, I think I'm going to introduce our two guests today.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know them at all.
Although the story starts actually with knowing Peter first. And it's kind of funny because when I was doing my undergrad work at OISE, I did not know that I stumbled on this guy named Seymour Papert, his work. And I said to Peter, oh my gosh, you would love this guy, Seymour Papert. And he said, ah, ha, ha, I know him. And it was sort of when I first met Peter, and I spent years having that experience where we would mention someone and he'd be, I know them. So that's how I came to know Sylvia and Gary through Peter and through Echo at my first ISTE, I think, conference. And I know that you all have the book. So on the first page, couple of pages there on page 6, there's an amazing biography of these two. But I just wanted to say a few personal things, and they could fill in otherwise. But Gary has been so pivotal in my learning, I'd have to say. One of the first recommendations of books to read, Gary, that you gave me was 100 Languages of Children. And each time you've recommended something, it has taken me on this path to new learning that has just been so impactful. And I know this book is going to do that from both of you for these Coding Connections teachers here. There's The Children's Machine, which is one of my all-time favorite books by Seymour Papert, but just as an educational philosophy book. Peter's got it right there, yeah. And What Do You Mean by Learning, which really, by Saracen, which really, helped me to dive deeply into the thing we call school and how that relates to learning. So I just want to thank you so much for that. And then Sylvia, we talk a lot about women in STEM. And when I think of women in STEM, I think of you, because you've been an engineer, a software developer, a video game designer, all of these things that relate to STEM. But I first met you when you were working with Generation Yes, which if folks don't know, was a platform for students to become empowered to be tech support at the school. And when I say tech support, I don't just mean knowing where to plug cords in. This program actually had students learn a window into pedagogy to support teachers in that important role as well. Fantastic. So when I met these two, it was just like they were like kindred spirits to me. So to have them write the Bible of the Maker movement, which is what you have, your book, I just am so thrilled that they're here to talk to you. And I know they'll fill in any other gaps around their introduction, but we're just so honored that you're here. And I don't want to waste any more time. I want to give you as much time as possible. So welcome to Ontario virtually, and we'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Stand up. So we figured we'd stand up because it's more energizing and like a real keynote. Well, thank you for your kind introduction, Brenda. You and Peter have been absolutely wonderful friends, and just every time we get together, we have these amazing discussions about what the world could be like. And now, we didn't predict this world that we're in right now, but the point of what we're celebrating today is the amazing things that you guys have done, and we've heard all about it, but also the amazing future we're looking at, the way that that computation is going to impact the future that our kids, in our classrooms today are going to be living in. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about the book and a little bit about this idea of computational X. So let's share the screen and get started.
Probably at the top. Zoom. There we go.
There it is. Found it. Share sound. Share. You can see our window, yes?
Looks good.
Excellent. So do you want to say hello too?
I'll say hello in a minute.
Okay. I know you've got Invent to Learn, and that's absolutely wonderful. Invent to Learn has gone around the world, and people have called it the Bible of the Maker Movement. We literally just got a box of these. It's been translated into Kyrgyz, and this is like the 7th language it's been translated in. The Republic of Kyrgyzstan wants to be on the cutting edge of what's happening in the world, and they've decided to translate Invent to Learn, and we're incredibly honored by that. When we wrote the first edition, and this purple book is the 2nd edition, we wrote the first edition in 2013 because the Maker Movement was coming up on both of our radars. And at the time, Brenda mentioned I worked for Generation Yes. Gary was doing keynotes and teaching classes and teaching grad students to be teachers. And we kept hearing about this Maker Movement and thinking, well, this is interesting. And we went to a Maker Fair and saw all this amazing technology and a lot of people who had not had good experiences in school. A lot of the makers who told us, I was interested in this and school didn't care. But they were obviously incredible learners. They taught themselves things that demonstrated what good learners they were. We also talked to a lot of parents who said to us things like, look at my kid, they're building robots, they're programming. I know they're learning, but every night I have to pull them away over that and we cry over worksheets. And sometimes they would say, what's wrong with my kid? Why don't they love school? It's the same. And we would talk amongst ourselves and say, it's not the same. These parents have a good question. We have to be able to answer parents who say, why does my kid love this kind of learning and not the kind of learning they're getting in school? So we wrote Invent to Learn to illustrate that there is a bridge between education and the Maker Movement, not to tell teachers what to do, because we know what to do. We know that kids who dive deeply into projects that they care about in a community that cares about them, whether it's virtual or face-to-face, they learn. And so we wanted to share the ideas that connected with the Maker Movement, the ideas that Seymour Papert created, and we called him the father of the Maker Movement, because his ideas about how projects can supercharge learning are the secret sauce of what the Maker Movement has good instincts about, but sometimes can't articulate. So we hope to we hope to situate the Maker Movement in an educational context.
And to outlive it.
And to be around when it was like, well, the Maker Movement, that's so 2013. When we wrote the 2nd edition, we of course updated the Lynx and added things about laser cutters. But we also added some things that we learned on our travels around the world. I personally will never accept when people say schools can't change, because I can tell you I've seen it. When schools get together, when dedicated people get together and decide to do something, schools can change. The Maker Movement was a catalyst for a lot of teachers finding out that they could be excited about teaching again. And we're really thrilled that
As was Logo a generation earlier.
Exactly. And these trends keep happening and keep coming back. So we want to keep encouraging people to be excited about learning, excited about teaching, incorporating the new and the modern things that are available today. And the projects you've done are part of all of that, these things that are happening worldwide.
What's going on with this?
So in our book, so one of the things we talked about was that there were 3 areas that we thought were the most likely, the 3 areas of the Maker Movement that were most likely to change education. That was fabrication, 3D printing and laser cutting, physical computing, robotics, wearable technology, and programming. So we spent some time in the book talking about the various ways that these three kinds of technologies could supercharge education. Today, we're going to be talking about programming mostly, but you have the book, so you can look at the other ones.
Well, thanks. I've been working in education for the last 39 years, trying to help teachers make sense of the wondrous opportunities that exist, not just to teach things to kids that we've always wanted them to learn, but to create opportunities for them to learn and know and do in ways that were unimaginable just a few years ago. So like what Sylvie was talking about, this is all in a grand progressive tradition of learning by doing, and making is one of the things that you can be doing. And computer programming has the ability to expand the breadth and depth and range of projects that have been possible before. And in a real sense, to bring project-based learning to mathematics for the first time in history. That lots of people had good instincts and experiences with language arts or social studies, to have interdisciplinary projects and to have kids work at their own pace and follow their own North Star. But it made it possible for this to be true in mathematics as well. You know, I like to say that schools have an obligation to introduce children to things they don't yet know they love, and to become good at something. And one of the areas where I think we can do a much better job is introducing kids to programming and to computation as a way of changing the world, as a way of expressing themselves, as a way of creating, as a way of knowing and learning. Now, I like to say that the reason why we should teach kids to program is because it's the new liberal art. It gives them agency over an increasingly complex and technologically sophisticated world. This is a photograph taken of Bill Gates and Paul Allen in the mid-70s, using a teletype very similar to the one that I use, connected to a mainframe computer system somewhere, where some smart adults got a hold of some stuff and said, here, kids, see what you can figure out, lock up when you're done. In 1975, I was lucky enough to be in Mr. Jones's class. It was a 7th grade public middle school computer programming class, where the expectation was that over 9 weeks in 1975, every single kid would learn to program. And for the first time in my life, I felt smart. I felt intellectually powerful. I felt creatively expressive, because we didn't know what was impossible. We thought anything was possible. And I spent the next, 6 years of school programming, getting better at programming, losing myself in bending the computer's will to bending the computer to my will, and of teaching other kids how to program. And then went off to become a jazz musician and never thought I'd use a computer again. But I've spent the last almost 40 years professionally trying to recreate that experience for kids. And the reason for this is because it answers the question that Papert began asking more than a half century ago, which is, does the computer program the child or the child program the computer? And at a time of rising authoritarianism around the world and science skepticism and accusations of fake news and all forms of demagoguery, it's worth putting kids in a catbird seat. It's worth putting them at the center of making sense of the universe and empowering them to recognize that they have the confidence and competence to solve any problem they confront, even if only to discover that there's more that they need to know. Now, as I mentioned before, computing allows us to expand what's possible. It adds colors to the crayon box. If we get time, I'll talk about the Marimba project a little later. But in short, these kids were using physical objects that were built based on calculations that the computer helped them perform in order to make something that they wanted. Now, as someone who's dedicated his entire adult life to educational computing, including work in the first schools where every kid had a laptop 30 years ago and created one of the first online master's degree programs, I've been at the right place at the right time on a number of these sort of major shifts in what's possible, including the maker movement. It is a sad reality that most technology in schools compares badly to clay or paint. It just does. Most of what computers are used for in schools is an insult to the intelligence of kids and to teachers. Computer programming is the exception. And I should mention, Brenda talked about the 100 Languages of Children, the book written about the Reggio Emilia approach. I made this slide for a lecture that I gave in Reggio Emilia, and they didn't object to this assertion. So I stand by it. We both want to democratize rich experiences for kids, and that requires, in a modern age, for kids to have agency over the computer. Let's see if I can do this again. So we need to be able to hold two thoughts simultaneously. All kids need computer programming experience across the curriculum. like writing or singing or reading. But some kids will then later choose computer science as their project. We could talk about the distinction between these later if you have some questions about it. One of the things that we learned over and over and over again is that if we make simple things easy to do, we make complexity possible. When kids are able to solve problems, they're inspired to solve larger problems. I'm really deeply connected to this notion that I heard my friend, the great jazz musician Jimmy Heath, say many times, which was, what was good is good. And what you've been doing in your coursework, your work with Peter and Brenda, and is in a lot of cases 50 years old. And people think like 50 years old and computers, that doesn't go together. But what was good is good. And if you brought any of these experiences to kids, you immediately know how compelling the turtle is. I'm teaching a class of fourth graders in Alabama every week. They would do turtle geometry for the next 10 years if the adults let them. That there's these incredible neat phenomena attached to it. There's brilliant ideas from mathematics and computer science and cognitive science and artificial intelligence and progressive education that this is all grounded in, that makes this compelling no matter what era we introduce it to kids. So I've been thinking about these issues for a long time. You know, back in the mid-1970s, the first book to sell 1 million copies about computers was something called Basic Computer Games, originally published in 1974. There were lots of different editions of it. Our friend Dan Watt published a book called Learning with Logo in the early 80s. It sold over 100,000 copies. So you do the math on that. You think about how unbelievable it was that in 1984, 100,000 teachers had a copy of a book about how to teach logo programming to kids, when there were very few computers actually available. The Computing Teacher, which was ISTE's magazine, their journal, you know, in the 80s, there's 6 articles about recursion in one issue. We asked teachers to do hard things and they rose to the challenge. And they in turn created opportunities for the kids to do things that were unimaginable just a few years ago. So I've wondered how these ideas of recreational computing could return, where you had to type in hundreds of lines of code and they would never work, and then you'd have to debug. And you know, when I learned to program, there was a several-year period where we never saw a program written by someone we didn't know. You know, the best rule for managing behavior in a computer-rich environment is you can play any game you wrote. Now kids can actually make video games that are look like real video games that you can put in a cabinet like a real video game, and you can have an arcade in your school cafeteria that was wholly created by the kids. But when we think about computer games, we often just have sprites bumping into each other. But we ought to be using rules and logic and simulation and probabilistic behavior. My old friend Tom Snyder used to say the third law of software design is kids like to be randomly screwed on a regular basis. You know, if there's a ship, there has to be pirates. But you're adding stuff that's connecting to all kinds of other disciplines and powerful ideas. And one of the powerful notions of teaching programming is that there are multiple on-ramps. We can introduce Logo or Lynx through music, through playing with linguistics, through physical computing, through mathematics, through science, through storytelling. So I've been fascinated by under what conditions recreational computing could return. Things people care about, things that people do as a hobby because they're hard fun. And I thought that the maker movement might be a key to that renaissance. But alas, despite the fact that we can now make things with atoms, we started out by making things with our hands, then we can make things with bits, then we can make things with bits and atoms. We seem to have left the bits behind again.
So, you know, one of the things that the maker movement brought to me personally was it really connected me back to my engineering roots. As Brenda mentioned, I was an engineer, and I got an electrical engineer. So, you know, unlike Gary, I had a very conventional kind of schooling. I was a good student. I did well in math and science. Somebody once said to me, "Oh, that means you should be an engineer." And I said, "Okay," and I got an engineering degree. And it turned out to be a really good thing for me. It was the kind of practical plus mathematical stuff that I liked. And when I graduated, there were a lot of aerospace jobs for electrical engineers. And one of them really stood out to me because they said, we're going to build something that's never been built before. We're going to make a machine that you can take anywhere in the world, North Pole, under the sea, and put it in a helicopter or a plane or in a backpack of someone walking across the desert, and you will be able to tell where you are in the world within 10 meters. And we're like, you know, that's crazy. They said, nope, we're going to do it. We think we're going to be able to do it in 3 years. Would you like to be on the team? And before I said yes or no, they said, just so you know, by the way, this may be impossible. We're not really sure this is going to work. The math is only a theory. The hardware doesn't exist. We haven't written the software yet because the hardware doesn't exist. This was based on a 40s movie star Hedy Lamarr theory of mathematical reckoning that was used for radar, but we're going to repurpose it and use it for this contraption. And you know, we're not sure we're going to be able to do it. Would you like to be on the team? And I was like, oh yeah, now we want to be on the team. What kid doesn't want to be on the team of something that's never been done before? So all of the things that I'd learned up to that point sort of prepared me for this job, but not really. There was no one who could have said when I was in 10th grade or 8th grade or 2nd grade, you will need to know these things to be a successful engineer. Because when I got to the engineering job, it was all completely up in the air. Stuff just invented, stuff thrown together, theories that may or may not work. So, you know, part of what we're looking for, what we're looking at is this future where kids are going to be working in jobs where we're not sure what they're going to be doing, but we know they're going to be solving problems. And one of the first things I learned in my engineering job is that it was a lot more like my dad's auto mechanic repair shop than it was like the science and mathematics I'd gotten in school. Now, when you try and bring those things together, sometimes you have really interesting results. And in fact, we did introduce the first GPS satellite navigation receiver in about 3 years. And now I have one in my watch and my phone, and I don't remember what the world was like without it. And yet, at just a few years ago, it didn't exist at all, except in the minds of a few engineers. And I know that's going to be happening with the kids that are sitting in our classrooms today.
So I want to share some advice and then some examples. The first thing is, you know, always wise advice, which is that we should slow down. Again today saw someone post on a social media board, I have to teach programming for 4 days. What should I do? Well, not much is what you should do. You should do less. With forward and right, you can draw anything in the universe. And it's just adult impatience that causes us to rush kids before they're ready to sort of exploit what's actually possible. That doesn't mean we want to be stingy with commands or reporters or primitives that we provide for them. If a kid asks or he expresses a need, then we should support them in that. But we can do less is more. Our goal is fluency. We want kids to be able to sing or dance or write with code, as opposed to just, you know, recreate lessons or examples that we've shared with them. You know, I'm obsessed with the question of what's the smallest seed I can plant as a teacher that grows the largest blossom, the most beautiful garden. What's the least that I can do so I can shift this maximum agency to the learner so that they can benefit the greatest? I like to say less us, more them. Anytime you think you should intervene on behalf of some educational transaction, it's worth asking a question, is there less that I can do and more that they can do? So if you ask kids to draw a stick figure in Lynx, as they show it to you, you know, you say, can you make it double? Can you make it half that size? Can you make its dog? Where's the rest of its family? Hey, it's on a tilt. Looks like it's skateboarding. Draw the skateboard. You can keep the energy level up, the intensity level up, and continuously expand upon what the kids are capable of doing so that they themselves develop these sort of generative skills of asking their own questions and building upon their own success. So a lot of people talk about the design process as being iterative. And sure, some design processes are iterative, like if you're making something for a customer. But the best stuff is when you make it for yourself. And I find that one of the powerful aspects of environments like Logo is that when you have forward and right, you have an idea of something to try, and that idea generates another idea, which generates another idea, which generates another idea. And occasionally those ideas push up against the persistence of reality, and you have to engage in some debugging processes. But as teachers, building the skill set to be able to help kids generate ideas, I think is really powerful and underlooked. I was in a school a couple of years ago where they wanted me to see, you know, the real high flyer kids, and they took me into this classroom, and I met a half dozen 5th or 6th grade girls, and they were all proud of these kids because they had just won a contest to make an app. Statewide, there was a contest to make an app, and they made the award-winning app. And I looked at it, and the kids were happy about winning the trophy, and what they'd done was pretty good, and the programming was okay. And then I asked the kids 2 questions that helped me assess everything that was happening in that school culture. The first question I asked was, what else have you made? And they stared blankly at me. And then I asked, and what would you like to make next? And in unison, they turned to look to the teacher for an answer. If you want to know if your teaching of coding, of programming is effective, the best way to judge that is to see if the kids keep doing it when you're not looking. If the kids have ideas for other things they want to do, if they ask for help, if they continue doing it after the bell rings or after the course ends. So where do you get inspiration for these kinds of projects? You know, you walk around in life, some people see it in nature. I was on a walking tour of the Kensington section of London, and they explained that up until a couple of hundred years ago, no one had street addresses on their homes. But if you were rich, you would have these fan lights above your front door, and they were these semicircles with patterns in them, and everyone was unique. And if you actually were affluent enough to invite people to your home or to receive deliveries, you would have a picture of your fan light on a card, and you would hand people this card, and that's how they would find you. And immediately the light bulb went on. I thought, that's the world's coolest logo project that has all the geometry that you could ever want a kid to learn within a semicircle, within constraints, that would, and it has the historical part and the oddity and the sort of neat phenomena of that's how people identified where they live attached to it. You know, you could draw stuff that's actually figurative, like make actual Star Wars characters. If I turned the camera around, you would see a giant blank wall over the sofa in our living room. We renovated this room, I don't know, 5 years ago, and we still don't have anything to hang above the couch. And occasionally on home decorating shows, we see like polka dots on canvases. So I've played with this. I haven't actually printed any of them yet, but why not make a polka dot canvas and have it printed? You can get anything fabricated, but why does it have to be polka dots? Why does it have to be, symmetrical? Why can't we sort of stagger the patterns or have random sizes or colors? Or why do they have to be polka dots at all? Why can't they be splotches? And so, introducing this idea to kids, and I've done it, and with teachers as well, it takes 30 seconds to introduce it to them, and you'll immediately have 1,000,001 possibilities. And as you probably have already experienced in your own teaching, it doesn't take more than one session before someone to take you aside and say, that kid's on an IEP, or that kid's never produced before. I've never seen that kid as excited as they are now. Here's a project that a colleague of ours, Josh Ajima, who's a tech teacher in Virginia, just did as part of a microbit course we were teaching online. And he was connecting the microbit to Scratch. But I want to share this with you because I want to talk about how to generate ideas for projects.
Hello, today I'd like to play for you the interactive art synthesizer, a piece that Isaac Budman and I wrote in Scratch, and today we'll be performing for you on microbit.
So when he pushes a button or tilts in a different way, it plays a note and draws the ray of light. Now, you don't need to have a microbit for it, although it's kind of cool to do it. You can do it with keyboard keystrokes. What I love about this project is that it immediately made me start thinking of other ideas. Like, I wonder if I could write a computer program that would harmonize what I was playing with my keystroke. How would it do that? Well, it would have to keep track of the previous note that was played and then guess based on sort of Western harmonic traditions, what note to play under it. What if two of us had them so we could harmonize in real time with one another? What if you don't have polyphony in the system? Lynx isn't very good at polyphony. Well, how about just deciding which notes those 6 inputs could represent to create the most melodic melodies? So from that one prompt, literally there would be people spending decades trying to solve the problem of computer accompaniment, of reharmonization. And I'm obsessed with this question of how do we teach teachers to understand how to create these conditions for kids. And I was recently reminded of something my friend Dan Watt wrote in the 1970s, where he gave kids instructions for learning. Try anything that comes to mind, hang around and watch what other kids are doing, write down everything you find out and everything you do, write down all your questions until you get all the answers. Sort of simple idea, but we don't really have to remind kids to do this. They tend to do it naturally. We have to remind adults to do it. But it's sort of this idea of if you have an idea, you can act upon it. We want kids to do real things, but we should recognize that cereal box dinosaur made by a 7-year-old is a real thing. We shouldn't disrespect the culture of childhood, but we should include whimsy, beauty, curiosity, and playfulness in what we do. So here's a project that was done at Constructing Modern Knowledge, a summer institute that we've been running for 13 years. A couple of years ago, teachers had an idea to make shoes that when you click the heels together, it would call a car for you. And they called it Schuber. And it turns out the API or the software toolbox for this is freely available. And they actually made this thing and it actually worked. So this isn't like, the invention convention nonsense that we do in schools all the time where kids scribble some picture about, spaceships and everyone applauds them for. You can actually make the thing. You can have crazy whimsical ideas now and make them. This is a robotics project programmed in Logo, Snap in this case. That's not a truck that kills some other school's truck in a competition. It's actually this beautiful sculpture. You can see it being assembled that.
Hello there. Come a little closer. Let Soldana read your aura.
It has motion detection, it has a coin slot, and it will randomly tell your fortune. So most of you probably know how to write a program in Lynx that will tell a fortune.
Come up to her, you would slide it in and out, and then the light sensor would get.
Kelly Knight's a primary school teacher in Florida. She'd been to Constructing Modern Knowledge 4 or 5 times, and she knew at that point that nutty ideas were not only permissible, but we relished them. And she said for her project over 4 days, she wanted to make an animated Marie Antoinette wig, as you do. And there's this beautiful paper folding sculpture. It's a gorgeous wig she made. And there's birds flying around the head with a microcontroller. And when she leans forward,
Yes.
the accelerometer tells the program to play birds tweeting. And there was a straw that she could spit into and it blow into it. It would shoot 3D printed bees out the top of it. Yeah. But again, all the sort of engineering principles that you would want to come out of that after school club where 5 boys built a truck to kill some other school's truck is now something that's convivial. It's something that's friendly. It's something that's democratic. It's something that's available to all kids because we have multiple on-ramps to those same skills. So I know what you're thinking. So what about the curriculum? Well, how about fractions? That's a piece of garbage that we teach kids for 2 or 3 years. Complete piece of nonsense that no one ever uses for anything except in schools. I was working in a school in Los Angeles where the teacher had written on the whiteboard, learn numerator and denominator. It had been on the board for so long, you could no longer erase it. We were either going to have to chip it off the board or buy a new whiteboard. And I just said, that's it. I'm losing my mind over this. And I said to the kids, the first kid who writes a program in MicroWorlds, which is Lynx, that lets me type in any fraction and it draws me a representation of that fraction as parts of a circle, I'll take you out to lunch. I wasn't sure I was allowed to do that. Didn't matter. Little girl raised her hand and said, can we work together? I said, of course you can. And the next day she handed me this program. It's about a dozen lines of logo. And it in fact lets me type any fraction, including hard ones in, and draws me a graphic representation of that fraction as parts of a circle. And what infuriates me about this is, one, the notion that project-based learning is inefficient or ineffective. Because if the kids could be engaged in a programming project for 2 or 3 days that has greater efficacy at understanding the curriculum than 2 years being dedicated to, or in this case, 8 or 9 months, then we should do that. And what's really galling is all that was expected of the kids was to know which word was the top word and which word was the bottom word. You can flip a coin and have been accurate more often than they were. by trying to memorize some terms that had no meaning to them. But when you're using numerator and denominator as the inputs to your procedures, you understand it. And if we made the list for the inspectors of the 50 or 60 math skills and computer science skills that are embodied in that 12 lines of code, we would see and be able to demonstrate that kids are learning a great deal. So I'm going to bring this to an end so that we can take some questions. There are lots of reasons to learn to program, to make things work, to express yourself, to develop habits of mind, to solve problems, to concretize abstractions, to contextualize mathematics. Mathematics is a way of making sense of the world, and computer programming is a way of making mathematics. It mirrors the writing process in various design cycles. You can do it by yourself or with others. It's hard fun, and then in tiny little print, it leads to jobs, careers. I mean, the idea that Sylvia talked about before of we can't predict careers in the future, we never could. We never could. I was at physical therapy yesterday, and they've got a pool where people are doing physical therapy in the pool, and I asked the doctor of physical therapy, how much experience did you have with the pool when you were in school? And you know what the answer is? 0. How much time do you spend in a pool now? Lots. There's all sorts of careers we didn't prepare kids for. If school shouldn't be vocational in nature. It should be about learning and learning to learn, and recognizing that you inherently have the capacity to learn more when faced with challenges or inspiration. Now, the reason why we call this talk Computational X is something that Stephen Wolfram has introduced into our thinking. Stephen Wolfram is arguably the world's most important living mathematician, computer scientist. He's revolutionized quite a few fields in his career. He was a MacArthur genius at 19, I think, had a PhD before that. And this is a conversation he had with Howard Gardner, and I recommend Googling this, watching the whole conversation on YouTube. But in it, he said that for any enterprise, for any intellectual discipline, for any vocation X that exists today, there is already or soon will be a branch of that discipline called computational X, from archaeology to zoology. And computational X not only represents the frontiers, the vanguard of thinking in that discipline, but for folks who have crass motives, the more lucrative aspect of it as well. And so whether it's music or playing with science or understanding COVID transmissibility, the ability to model with the computer, to make things out of bits, to solve your own problems, to mess around with data, will serve all kids well in the future. So there's lots of environments for kids to learn about learning and to learn better through programming. Lynx and Snap and MakeCode and TurtleStitch and BeetleBlocks and Wolfram language that provide opportunities for kids to know and do in ways that were unimaginable before. So as we're in this crazy time, it's worth recognizing that the near future, let alone the far future, is uncertain. We have scarce resources for any number of reasons, not just funding, but because of safety and sanitation and health reasons. We should recognize that the best makerspace is between your ears, and that kids have nothing but time during the pandemic and during all these sort of flexible, emerging, changing, transforming schooling setups that we have. So programming is something that really flourishes with sufficient time. And we should recognize that if we're looking for something good to do now, and I would argue into the future, that programming offers the perfect makerspace for these times and for years to come. So we have a lot of resources related to the stuff that we've been talking about and doing at invent2learn.com/questions. And at that point, I'm happy to take some questions. And again, thank you for your patience and the work you do on behalf of kids. And we're happy to have a conversation now.
Awesome. So who has questions? That was awesome. I'm like, I need to start learning to code. I'm the only person here, I think, who doesn't really know how to code. So I'm sold.
Coding's for everyone.
So feel free to grab the mic, folks, or
Please.
Question in the chat.
I put pants on for this.
Yeah.
Anyone notice the shirt, by the way?
Very nice. It's hard to see. Tell us.
They're floppy disks.
Ah, good.
It's retro.
Yeah. Who's got a question?
Yeah, we have the chat open if you'd rather type, or
Don't be afraid. The clown's afraid too.
take the mic.
I'm gonna jump in. I
Yeah,
I really appreciate the way, and I wish more students and educators can hear what you had to share today. Really appreciate the way that you made it that coding is not cold, isolated, lonely. It is rich. It is warm. You bring it to your home. And I put it in the chat, like when you mentioned, you know, you're looking for something to put up on your wall. I literally just tweeted, we should take the student artwork with my teaching partner and print them on our buttons so they could wear it on their buttons, the projects that they've coded, because it's this beautiful art, right? So I'm like, yes, this is what it's about. It's not something done in isolation, right? So I really just wanted to thank you for bringing that element, because that part is so, that the personal part, the human part is so very much a part of the whole environment.
You know, it's really so human. You know, it's integral to who we are as people to be able to express ourselves. And different people express themselves in different ways. We get so tied up in school into these little silos, and this is the right answer and this is the way to do things. But art creates opportunities. And for kids who aren't this kind of typical academic, art creates opportunities for them to do interesting things, to talk about the interesting things that they've done, to do the next interesting thing. And you know, we have a project that's documented in Invent to Learn in the preface to the second edition, that started out as a Constructing Modern Knowledge, our Summer Institute project. One of the participants had gone to Spain and had come back and was interested in the Islamic tiles, and she had a lot of Islamic tile pattern photographs that she'd taken, and she worked and she worked and she worked in Logo to try and duplicate these patterns, and ultimately was very successful with a little bit of troubleshooting and thinking about symmetry and the kinds of things that aren't in math textbooks. And one of another participant just saw the project, and then he went back to his school and led the fourth graders in a project where he used turtle art to ask them to draw Islamic patterns. And this was part of a fourth grade world culture unit. Islamic tilings have a reason. There's a reason that the rules exist. The mathematical rules support, you know, a worldview and a cultural viewpoint. And then he took the turtle art, exported it, and took it to Tinkercad and printed them out. So you actually have a thing that looks like an Islamic tile pattern. You could use it as a decoration. You could stamp paint with it. He had the kids stamp ceramic clay tiles, paint them, and then they had a class set of tile patterns that started in world culture, went through mathematics, and it had personal expression involved. And he published it on his blog. He wrote a book for us called The Invent to Learn Guide to Fun. This is Josh Berker I'm talking about. And that project has been replicated around the world in 100 ways.
Footpaths through school gardens, entryways to school,
vinyl stickers
on windows.
In Canada, someone did an Indigenous Native project where they patterned, instead of Islamic tiling as the overarching principle, it was Native patterns. And so then they did clay pots with these programmed Native patterns. And so, someone was in one of my workshops and saw this, and I ran into her a couple years later, and she said, I went home and I showed this to my daughters, and they immediately thought of designing slow feed dog bowls, because apparently after millions of years of evolution, your dogs need to eat slower. And you can actually buy these things that are dog bowls designed to piss off your dogs. And the kids actually, then that was something they could 3D print. And we're finding a lot of environments that have a really nice bridge from what you could do on the screen to what you can hold in your hand. And it's not just that this is going from the digital to analog, which is lovely, or that it's going from mathematics to art, because you couldn't produce anything this intricate without using the mathematics.
But that in the 2 minutes it took us to share this with you, you know how to do it, and you have a lot of other ideas, which is what makes a great project. That it inspires you at any level, at any any sort of discipline.
And a lot of times there's a disconnect when we talk to kids about art and math. We like hold up a pine cone and say, look, Fibonacci, and they're supposed to like somehow understand this. That math is in nature and music, and 1, 2, 3, 4. How is that math? Or we're going to measure something and build something, and that's math. But there are so many connections you can make when you use the computational tools that are available for every age. Kids can make their own connections about the world and express themselves in ways that were completely unavailable to kids just a decade ago. I think that the future's amazing, has just amazing potential for kids to be doing things that we don't have the slightest idea what the outcome is going to be. Isn't that great?
I mean, I have a slide in some other presentations that I've done where I talk about how you can not only, collaborate with scientists and, all the stuff that people have hyped about the internet, but there was I found a YouTube video of a recording of a session that Stephen Wolfram did with children about called live coding, where he's coding with them in real time, and he archived this video, and the topic was COVID-19 transmission, and the date was mid-February 2020.
Right.
And this is a month before the president of the United States started pretending that the thing didn't exist. The idea of, imagine a world where kids were using tools where they could have made sense of this stuff, at the same time as scientists or ahead of their political leaders. They might not have found a cure for COVID quicker, but they certainly would have had a little less science skepticism and a little more scientific literacy, fluency.
Sarah's asked a really good question in the chat that comes up all the time. How do we assess this stuff? And first of all, we wrote like 3 or 4 chapters of Invent to Learn about this exact topic. I think when people get it, they get it, right? So we all sit around going, of course this is great for kids, but then we have to go out into the real world and explain it to people who just aren't getting it. But part of it is that we have to show them. And that when you show projects that are of this quality and this caliber that you guys have been working on, that you're going to be doing in the future, that we've showcased in our book, other people will understand. And it might take them some time because, the culture is full of like rules about school, what school looks like. There has to be a handwriting chart. There has to be an apple on the desk. And it's like breaking those kinds of things is not easy. But actually, the technology gives you more evidence that the kids are actually learning something.
It's making their thinking visible.
It's making their thinking visible, and it's also making it savable. You can save a design file and say, look, see what my kids produced. It's not just, a painting that's disappeared. You can actually say that the kids, worked on, used ratios in this specific way. It's not just a big paper mache pack of gum where you can just kind of wing it, right? These design tools create opportunities for saving things and then reproducing them. And that's part of the assessment. There's also assessment techniques for project-based learning. Every music teacher knows that you have to listen to 100 kids playing a terrible version of some song, and you have to listen to every terrible version of that song, and then they get better because you can give them advice that helps them become better, and they practice more, and all of a sudden it's recognizable. So these things are solved in other classes. Like English, you have to read their essays. They have to write lots of essays. You have to read lots of essays to help them make them better. The kinds of things we're talking about today, it may take some time for us to understand how to make them better and how to help kids. You shouldn't just say, fault yourself for saying, I don't know how to do this instantly for this thing that's just been invented.
So let me start with a happy answer, and I'll digress from there. The happy answer is I've run a lot of family workshops in schools around the world. And when parents can see through the eyes and the hands and the screens of their kids what's possible, they change their mind about all this and they demand wholesale changes in their school. So though we can't choose for something we haven't seen and experienced ourselves, all of our work is rooted in the Piagetian idea that knowledge is a consequence of experience, and there's no substitute for experience. The second thing is teachers need to develop the ability to articulate what it is that the kids are learning by doing that. Not just they're having fun, not just that they're collaborating, not just that they're problem solving or dealing with or overcoming failure, but they multiply 2-digit numbers. You should be able to look at any project a kid did and write down 50 things in your plan book that were accomplished. Those are the affirmative, positive answers. The negative ones are, how dare you come up with assessments for a field you know nothing about? And assessment isn't the problem of the kids. No, the policymakers. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And so, you know, everything ends up working backwards from this crazy position of arrogant ignorance that's impossible to overcome. For better or for worse, assessment is the problem of teachers. It's not the problem of kids. And the further you can keep it from the kids, the better. You should be able to understand the thinking of each kid. Well, one of the lessons from Reggio Emilia is that it's the primary responsibility of teachers to understand the thinking of kids, to make their private thinking public, their invisible thinking visible. You should be able to look at what a kid has done and be able to translate that for some knucklehead who's asking you, how did you know they learned something? And that's the skill set that you need to develop.
Well, we're
I'm so
you
glad
guys,
it's 5 o'clock.
You guys were here. The time has flown by. We're so happy to have spent some time with you, and we congratulate you again on the projects you've done and the work that you've done, and that we know you're going to continue to do in the future.
Anyway, I just want to step in and say thank you, Gary. Thank you, Sylvia. It's we miss you an awful lot here. It's been a delight to hear you. I'm glad we only had that amount of time because Gary's just getting warmed up and was going to go to some dangerous places. But that's what we love, and that's why we wanted you here.
You should have told us that he was not at all passionate.
Yeah.
I wasn't even on one yet.
Yeah. Sometime, if you ever get a chance, ask Gary how he and I met. That's a whole interesting story. We don't have time for it now. No. And you've been an inspiration. You've both been an inspiration to certainly to Brenda, me, and to many others across the world, of course. Sylvia, I've been blessed to know you as well for a long time and have watched you evolve into this really, I don't know, passion, like just evolve. And some of the presentations we saw at ISTE a couple of years ago were super impressive. And so you continue to inspire.
I used to not talk. I mean, I was an engineer, so I spent like 20 years like not talking. Then all of a sudden I decided I should probably start like saying things. And
that was a good idea. That was a good idea. And we know how challenging that must be for you. Getting a word in edgewise, no offense, Gary. So anyway, I have a question for you about constructing modern knowledge. What's that look like this year? Just before next week.
We had to cancel
over time.
You know.
Yeah, I know.
But this year we're exploring some options. We keep hoping that things will just turn around, but knowing
the problem is the schools are slower than the vaccine.
I mean, even if we could plan for something from July and decide on July 1st, that's not enough time for schools to decide to send people and trip planning and stuff like that. We fear that schools will end before we're really positive enough to be able to hold a session.
So what we'll do is share the constructing modern knowledge information with our folks. And I'm getting, Lindy's giving me the hairy eyeball because she wants to keep this on time here. And so thank you so much.
If you go to any of our sites, put your
name in, because we're going to be doing something this fall. We will pivot and do something.
Okay, I'll drop it in the chat anyway. And who am I turning this back over to now? Lindy?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, folks. See you soon.
Thanks so much, you guys. It was awesome. Absolutely incredible. I'm going to share my screen. And this is where we're going to next. So we really want to give you guys time to be able to present to us some of your learning, some of your experiences. I'm really happy that Parker in his introduction said that he had looked at your projects. I have loved looking at the reports of your projects. And today we have the opportunity to each of us at least hear 3. So we've created 2 breakout rooms. Peter is going to put the link to this document in the chat so that you don't, if you're not able to remember who's where, this is how it's going to work. You're going to select, you can go in and out of breakout rooms. Just remember when you're leaving a breakout room, do not choose leave meeting. You've got to leave the breakout room. You can come back into the main meeting room and then go into the other breakout room if you're not wanting to stay in the one that you're at for all 3. But this is how it's going to go. And I'm just going to say to you, we're starting a little bit late, so shift by 5 minutes. Okay, so it says we're starting at 5 to 5:15. We'll go 5:05 to 5:20, 5:20 to 5:35, and 5:35 to 5:50. When it is your turn to present, presenters, be rude and tell the person who's before you that they have to stop talking and get started right on time, because otherwise we won't get through all of them. And I really want everybody to have that opportunity.
When you go to the breakout room, hover over the numeral on the right-hand side so that it says join. Otherwise, you won't see it.
So at the bottom, you can see the breakout rooms. You can go into number 1 or number 2. Peter, have you put the link to that document that I just shared?
Yes.
You have, you're so good. So people can consult with it and remember where they're going. I'll share it one more time before people have all gone so that they can take another look and decide if they're going to breakout 1 or breakout 2. Off you go. You just hover over the room and it should let you join it. Please let us know if you're having problems joining the rooms.
I'm having trouble joining the rooms. Where am I finding this?
Annika, if you look at the bottom, there's something that's called breakout rooms.
I'm not seeing that.
It's like 4 little
Oh.
at the very bottom of your screen. It should say breakout rooms.
No.
Is anybody else
Okay.
seeing them?
I'm also having issues.
Are you guys folks on a laptop?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm on a desktop.
Okay. I just wondered if you were on a phone or an iPad because it can sometimes look different. You should be okay. Let's see if we can assign you.
I'm not seeing any breakout room option at the bottom of my screen.
Okay.
Yes.
Danica, which one did you want to go to?
Let's go to 2. I'll start at 2.
Okay, so I'm going to try to assign you to 2, and then a button might pop up for you to click and join, okay?
Okay, thank you.
No, it's not letting me do that. Lindy, are you able to do that where you click on assign to?
I will try. Hold on. Danica. No, it is for some reason it is. Oh, there you go. Okay, which one did you say, Danica? 2?
I'll start at 2.
There you
Oh,
go.
there it is. Thank
Okay,
you.
I think it worked. Who else is not able to get? Anna, where do you want to go?
Number 1, please.
Okay, you're there.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I did it, but it hasn't moved you for some reason.
You might just have to hit the blue button.
Oh yeah, she's gone. She's gone. Okay,
Tina Noel, room 2.
Number 2, please.
just a second. There. Who else? Godefroy?
Number 2. Number 2, 1.
Number 2.
2.
Perfect.
Andy, can you for number 1?
So you have to identify.
Number 2.
I thought I had you. I think I sent Godefroy there. Okay. Should go. They're showing me it's going, but sometimes it takes a moment. John, where do you want to go?
Oh, it looks like John got it.
Okay, it's not showing him as assigned. Tyson?
Number 1, please.
There we go.
Thank you.
I know there's somebody on the phone. I don't think I can assign them.
I think John asked for number 1 on the chat box.
Yeah, I put him into number 1, so that's weird. I'll try again. Sometimes it takes some time.
There we
Okay,
go.
I think that's everybody. Super.
Who's our person on the phone?
They're muted. Hold on. I'm not sure
I
who's
wonder
on.
if I wonder if that's Sebastian.
Could be.
He had a COVID class closure, so that's what's been happening for him. He's had to take all his materials home to be ready to be home for a while.
Okay.
613 is in Ottawa, isn't it?
Brenda, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Now the people that we assign, do you think they can move out of where they were assigned to, or are they stuck?
Well, when you demoted Peter, he could do it. So yes.
Okay, but Peter, in the case, he was not assigned, and we've assigned some of them. So, but anyway, hopefully they can come back to the main room if they have problems. I'm going to see if I can go into one of the rooms. And you still cannot go in, Brenda?
I can't seem to go in, but I'll stay here in case anybody accidentally kicks themselves out. But I'm going to try as well, because you should get a notice if someone asks for help, and you should get a notice if someone comes into the main room, and you'll be able to pop back out.
Okay. Parker, you're going to head out.
Yeah, I have a phone call in 5 minutes, so I'm going to say adieu.